The cream-colored envelope sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I found the courage to open it. My hands trembled as I finally broke the seal and unfolded the hospital letterhead inside. The words, Stage 3, leaped off the page and lodged in my throat like a stone. At 65, I had always imagined growing old gracefully, tending to my garden, taking my grandchildren to the park on weekends, perhaps even dating again after 5 years of widowhood. Cancer wasn't part of that picture. Neither was bankruptcy. The estimated out-of-pocket costs outlined in clinical black and white made my heart sink even further than the diagnosis itself. I'm Barbara Wilson, and this is the story of how my son's rejection became my greatest liberation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The oncologist's office smelled of antiseptic and artificial lavender, an unsettling combination that did nothing to calm my racing heart. Dr. Sharma sat across from me, her face composed but kind as she walked me through treatment options, surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, immunotherapy. Each word carried its own weight, its own fear. But the numbers she wrote down, insurance deductibles, co-pays, uncovered treatments, those formed a mountain I couldn't see myself climbing alone. "Do you have family who can help support you through this, Mrs. Wilson?" Dr. Sharma asked, sliding a pamphlet for financial assistance across her desk. My throat tightened. "Yes," I said automatically. "My son and daughter." On the drive home, my white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel couldn't stop the trembling that had taken over my body. Oak Ridge's familiar streets blurred past. The elementary school where I'd taught 3rd grade for 30 years. The park where I'd pushed Thomas and Jennifer on the swings as toddlers. The church where I'd said goodbye to my husband Richard 5 years earlier. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. "It's treatable," I whispered to myself, repeating Dr. Sharma's words. "With proper care, the prognosis is good." Proper care that would cost nearly $70,000 beyond what my teacher's insurance would cover. I pulled into my driveway, staring at the modest 2-bedroom ranch house Richard and I had purchased 40 years ago. The mortgage was paid off, thank goodness, but my retirement savings had taken a hit during the recession. Richard's medical bills before he passed had further depleted our nest egg. I'd been careful with money, clipping coupons, shopping sales, driving my 15-year-old Camry until it practically wheezed, but careful hadn't been enough. Not for this. Inside, I dropped my purse on the kitchen counter and looked at the refrigerator door, covered with my grandchildren's artwork, Emma's detailed charcoal sketches, showing her budding talent at 14. Aiden's computer-generated graphics, meticulous and precise like his father. Sophie's exuberant watercolors, splashing beyond the paper's edges. My hands no longer trembled as I reached for the phone. They were steady now, fueled by the fierce determination that had carried me through widowhood, through raising 2 children largely on my own while Richard worked double shifts at the factory, through 30 years of nurturing other people's children in my classroom. I would beat this. But I needed help. Thomas answered on the 4th ring, his voice distracted. I could hear the clatter of keyboard keys in the background. "Mom, can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something." "It's important, Thomas." My voice came out stronger than I expected. There was a pause, a soft sigh. "Give me 5 minutes to wrap this up. I'll call you right back." He did call back 7 minutes later. By then, I had settled at my kitchen table, a notepad in front of me with the key points I needed to cover. Thomas had always appreciated organization and efficiency. As a child, he'd lined up his toy cars in perfect rows, categorized by color and size. In high school, his room remained spotlessly neat while Jennifer's looked like a hurricane had swept through it. Now, at 42, he was the youngest vice president at Meridian Financial, a fact he mentioned at every family gathering. "So, what's up?" Thomas's voice carried that particular cadence I recognized. The one that said he was still half focused on work. I took a deep breath. I've been diagnosed with breast cancer, Thomas. Stage 3. The keyboard clicking stopped. Jesus, Mom, are you serious? I'm afraid so. I start treatment next month. What did the doctor say? Are you going to be okay? The prognosis is good with proper treatment. It's aggressive, but they caught it before it spread further. I kept my voice level, factual. Thomas had never handled emotional displays well. Thank God for that. His voice softened momentarily. What do you need? Should Pamela bring over some meals? We could send Sophie and Aiden over this weekend to help with yard work. That would be nice, I said. But there's something else. I glanced down at my notepad, at the number circled in red ink. The treatments, they're expensive, Thomas. Even with insurance, I'm looking at around $70,000 out of pocket. The silence that followed lasted so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. Thomas? I'm here. His voice had cooled several degrees. Mom, what about your savings? The retirement fund? It's not enough. After your father's medical bills and the market downturn. So you've gone through everything? The accusation in his tone stung. The house is paid off. Can't you take out a reverse mortgage or something? I could, I admitted. But Dr. Sharma said stress can negatively impact treatment outcomes. The thought of possibly losing my home during all this. Mom, Thomas interrupted, his corporate voice fully engaged now. I've always told you to diversify your investments. Dad never planned properly for retirement, and then you kept most of your money in that teacher's pension and basic savings account. This is exactly why financial planning is so important. My fingers tightened around the phone. Thomas, I'm not asking for financial advice. I'm asking for help. Another silence followed, shorter this time. When he spoke again, his voice had that resigned quality I recognized from childhood negotiations over bedtime and curfews. How much are you asking for exactly? I closed my eyes briefly. I wouldn't need all of it. Maybe half. I could manage the rest with a small loan and $35,000? The incredulity in his voice made me flinch. Mom, we just put in a pool. Aiden's starting college visits this year. Sophie's orthodontist bill alone was $8,000 last quarter. I thought of Thomas's sprawling 5-bedroom house in Oak Ridge Heights, the European vacations documented meticulously on Pamela's social media, the brand new Tesla he'd bought himself for his last birthday. I thought of the check he'd written without hesitation for his country club membership. I understand you have expenses, I said carefully, but this is my health we're talking about, my life. And you should have saved better for it, he replied, the words falling between us like stones. Look, I can maybe give you $5,000. That's really all we can manage right now with our commitments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I steadied myself against the table edge, feeling a surge of something unfamiliar. Not hurt, not disappointment, but a clear, cold anger. I see, I said, my voice distant to my own ears. I'll call Jennifer. Mom, Thomas began, but I had already ended the call. Outside my kitchen window, the maple tree Richard had planted when Thomas was born cast dappled shadows across the lawn. 30 inches tall when we'd first put it in the ground, it now towered nearly 50 feet. All those years of growth, of strengthening, of putting down roots. And Thomas had grown just as tall, just as strong, nourished by our sacrifice and care. But unlike the maple, giving nothing back. Jennifer answered on the first ring, the sounds of the hospital nursing, floor bustling in the background. Mom, I was just about to go on break. Perfect timing. Despite everything, I smiled. Jennifer had always been sunshine in human form, rushing into rooms, trailing laughter and chaos, perpetually running 5 minutes late, but somehow making everyone glad they'd waited for her. "Do you have a minute to talk?" I asked. "For you?" "Always." Let me just duck into the break room. There was a shuffle, a door closing, then relative quiet. "Okay, I'm all yours. What's up?" I told her everything. The diagnosis, the treatment plan, the costs. Unlike Thomas, Jennifer didn't interrupt. She listened, occasionally making soft sounds of sympathy or asking clarifying questions about my symptoms and the doctor's recommendations. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice thick with tears, she said, "Oh, Mom." "I know it's a lot," I said quickly. "I don't expect—" "Stop right there," Jennifer cut in. "We're family. Of course we're going to help." "Jen, you're a single mother. Your budget is already stretched thin." "So what? We'll stretch it thinner." The determination in her voice was so familiar. It was my determination, the same stubborn resolve I'd passed down to her. "I can pick up extra shifts. Emma's been wanting to get a part-time job anyway. She can contribute to the household. Expenses while I send more to you." "I can't let you do that," I protested. "Emma's art classes are important, yes, but not more important than your life," Jennifer stated firmly. "Mom, do you remember what you did when I got pregnant my junior year of college?" The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "Of course I do. You sold Grandma's antique dining set, the one she left specifically to you, the one you loved, to help me pay for medical care and finish my degree. You never once made me feel like a burden." "You weren't a burden. You were my daughter. And you're my mother," Jennifer replied simply. "I have about $12,000 in savings. It's yours. We'll figure out the rest." Tears spilled down my cheeks, silent and unstoppable. "I called Thomas first," I admitted. "He offered $5,000, like it was a huge imposition." Jennifer's brief silence spoke volumes. "Did he mention the boat he just bought? 40-foot cabin cruiser. Emma saw the pictures on Aiden's Instagram." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "It doesn't matter. I'm just grateful for your help, Jen. But I can't take your savings." "You're not taking anything. I'm giving it." Her voice softened. "Mom, let people love you the way you've loved them, starting with me." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, looking at the 2 names I'd written on. My notepad, Thomas and Jennifer. Both my children, both raised in the same home with the same values. Where had the divergence happened? When had Thomas's ambition curdled into something so cold? I remembered him at 8 years old, proudly presenting me with a Mother's Day card he'd made himself, the careful lettering declaring me world's greatest mom. I remembered him at 17, devastated after his first heartbreak, allowing me to hold him while he cried. I remembered him at 22, in cap and gown, searching the crowd until he found my face, his smile radiant as he raised his diploma in triumph. And now this stranger, this man who looked at his mother's cancer and saw an inconvenient financial request. The magnitude of what I was facing settled over me like a heavy blanket. Not just the cancer and its treatment, but this fundamental recalibration of my understanding of my son, of my family, of what would come after if I survived. My hand reached for the phone again, almost of its own accord. Not to call Thomas back, not to call Jennifer. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Harriet Green's office," answered a crisp, professional voice. "This is Barbara Wilson," I said. "I'd like to make an appointment with Harriet as soon as possible. I need to update my will." The next morning, I awoke to 3 text messages from Thomas. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation. I hope you know I care about your health. Have you looked into clinical trials? Many of them cover treatment costs. Let's talk more about financial options that won't impact family budgets. I can help you make a plan." No mention of reconsidering his contribution. No acknowledgement of the hurt his response had caused. Just more financial advice and a suggestion that I become a medical guinea pig to save him money. I set the phone down without responding and went to make coffee. My appointment with Harriet wasn't until the following week, but already I felt a strange sense of calm. For 30 years, I'd structured my entire life around my children's needs and wants. Even after they'd grown and left home, major decisions were made with them in mind. Which trips to take, which home repairs to prioritize, how to allocate my modest savings. Always with the thought, someday this will be theirs. Now, stirring sugar into my coffee, I realized I was free of that constraint. The future had suddenly become very short and very clear. I needed to survive, and beyond that, I needed only to please myself. The doorbell rang as I was rinsing my cup. Through the peephole, I saw Pamela, Thomas's wife, standing on my porch in yoga pants and a designer pullover, looking polished despite the early hour. "Barbara," she said when I opened the door, air kissing near my cheek. "Thomas told me the news. I'm so sorry." I stepped back to let her in, noting that despite her words, she didn't look particularly sorry. Pamela had perfected a certain kind of country club sympathy over the years, appropriate phrases delivered with just enough emotion to seem sincere without risking her makeup. "Thank you," I said, leading her to the kitchen. "Would you like some coffee?" "God, no. I'm doing that intermittent fasting thing." She settled at my table, glancing around with the slightly pained expression she always wore in my modest home. "Thomas is worried about you." "Is he?" I kept my voice neutral as I refreshed my own coffee. "Of course, we both are. Cancer, it's just awful." She shook her head, diamond earrings catching the morning light. "But you know, my aunt had breast cancer 5 years ago, and now she's fine. Plays tennis 3 times a week." "That's encouraging," I said, sitting across from her. Pamela reached across the table to pat my hand. "The thing is, Barbara, Thomas and I want to help, but we're in a bit of a financial crunch right now. The market's been volatile and we've had some unexpected expenses with the house." I thought of their recent kitchen renovation, the imported Italian marble, the custom cabinetry, the Viking range that cost more than my car. "Pamela," I said gently, "why are you here?" She blinked, momentarily thrown off script. "To check on you, of course. And to explain about our situation." "Thomas already explained your situation quite clearly." I withdrew my hand from under hers. "You have other priorities." A flicker of annoyance crossed her perfect features. "That's not fair. We have commitments. The children's education, the mortgage." "I understand priorities," I interrupted. "I've been setting them my entire life. For 30 years, I packed my lunch in Tupperware containers and drove used cars so I could help put Thomas through business school without debt. I worked summer school every year so Jennifer could take dance classes and Thomas could go to computer camp. When Thomas needed braces, I canceled the only real vacation Richard and I had planned in a decade." Pamela's expression had gone carefully blank. "That's what parents do." "Yes," I agreed. "That's what parents do. And when those parents grow old or get sick, what do children do?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Barbara, if we could help more, we would. It's just not possible right now." I sipped my coffee, studying her over the rim. Pamela had never been unkind to me, but she had never been particularly kind either. I was an obligation, a required stop on holiday rounds, the grandmother who watched her children for free when their regular nanny called in sick. "I understand," I said finally. "Please let Thomas know I got his texts. I'll be exploring all my options." Relief washed over her face. "Good, that's good. And of course, if there's anything non-financial we can do, meals, driving you to appointments." "Thank you," I said, standing to signal the end of our conversation. I'll keep that in mind. After she left, I called the hospital's financial counseling office and made an appointment. Then I called my bank and inquired about a home equity line of credit, just in case. Finally, I called Jennifer again. "Mom, everything okay?" Her voice was instantly concerned. "Everything's fine," I assured her. "I just wanted to tell you that I've decided to handle the medical expenses on my own. I'm working with the hospital on a payment plan." "But Mom—" "No arguments," I said firmly. "You need your savings for Emma and yourself. I have options. The house has equity and my credit is excellent." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "This is about Thomas, isn't it? What did he do now?" I sighed. "It's not about Thomas. It's about me making my own decisions." "Mom," Jennifer's voice was gentle but insistent, "you don't have to shoulder this alone just because Thomas is being Thomas. I'm not, I promised, but I need to do this my way. You can help in other ways. Company during chemo, maybe some of your famous lasagna when I'm not feeling up to cooking." "Fine," she relented, "but this conversation isn't over." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table again, looking around. The house that had been my home for 4 decades. Every corner held memories, finger paintings taped to walls, height marks penciled on door frames, Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet evenings with Richard. I had always assumed this house would go to Thomas and Jennifer in equal shares someday, along with whatever modest savings remained. It had seemed only natural, the normal progression of family wealth. Now, with Harriet Green's number newly entered in my phone, I found myself contemplating a different kind of legacy altogether. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself in the spare bedroom closet, pulling down a plastic storage bin filled with old photo albums. The weight of it surprised me, not just the physical heft, but the emotional gravity of what it contained. Decades of memories pressed between plastic sheets. I carried it to my bed and opened the oldest album, its pages yellowed at the edges. Richard and me on our wedding day, young and impossibly hopeful. My finger traced the outline of his face, the broad smile, the slight crook in his nose from a childhood baseball injury, the unruly dark hair that never quite stayed combed. "What would you do?" I whispered to his image. I turned the pages, slowly, watching our life unfold in snapshots. The tiny apartment we'd first shared. The day we brought Thomas home from the hospital, Richard's face a mixture of terror and adoration as he cradled our son. Jennifer's arrival 3 years later, her birth announcement propped against a vase of pink roses. And then, buried between vacation photos and school portraits, I found what I hadn't even realized I was looking for. A newspaper clipping from 1987. The headline read, "Local teacher donates kidney to student's father." The student was Marianne Potter, a quiet 8-year-old in my 3rd grade class. Her father, David, had been dying of kidney disease. I was a match. The decision to me had seemed obvious. I remembered Richard's face when I told him I wanted to donate. Not angry, not afraid, just concerned. "Barb," he'd said, "this is major surgery. The kids are still so young. What if something goes wrong? What if we do nothing and Marianne loses her father?" I'd countered. How could I face her every day, knowing I could have helped and didn't? In the end, he'd supported my decision. Completely, taking family leave to care for Thomas and Jennifer during my recovery. Bringing me flowers in the hospital. Telling everyone he knew about his hero wife, with unabashed pride. The surgery had been successful. David Potter lived another 20 years, saw Marianne graduate college, walked her down the aisle at her wedding. Every year on the anniversary of the transplant, they sent me a card. When David finally passed, Marianne had written, "You didn't just save my dad, you saved my childhood." I closed the album, holding it against my chest. That younger Barbara, the one who had given a piece of herself to save a student's father, seemed simultaneously like a stranger and like the most authentic version of myself. Brave, decisive, generous to the point of sacrifice. When had I started to lose her? When had I begun to shrink myself, to make myself small and undemanding, particularly with Thomas? Perhaps it had started after Richard died. The crushing loneliness had made me cling tighter to my children, afraid of losing them too. I'd been careful not to burden them with my grief, my needs, my opinions. I'd deferred to Thomas's financial expertise, even when his advice hadn't felt right for my situation. I'd let Pamela dictate the terms of my relationship with my grandchildren, accepting whatever time they were willing to allot me. I'd been so afraid of becoming the stereotypical difficult mother-in-law, the needy widow, the bothersome elderly parent, that I'd failed to advocate for myself at all. The Barbara who donated her kidney wouldn't recognize this diminished version of herself. "No more," I whispered to the empty room, to Richard's smiling face frozen in time, to my younger, braver self. No more. Jennifer arrived the next morning with a stack of Tupperware containers and her daughter Emma in tow. "Before you protest," she said, bustling into my kitchen without waiting for an invitation, "this isn't charity. This is family." Emma and I stress-cooked all night. It was therapeutic. Emma, lanky and solemn at 14, gave me a careful hug. "I made the cookies," she said. "They're gluten-free because I read that might help with inflammation during chemo." "You researched that?" I asked, touched. She nodded, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I also downloaded some meditation apps on your iPad. The oncology forums said they help with anxiety." While Jennifer arranged the meals in my freezer, Emma gave me a tour of the meditation apps she'd installed, her voice gaining confidence as she explained each one. Unlike her exuberant mother, Emma had always been thoughtful, observant, processing the world quietly before offering her conclusions. "This one's supposed to be good for sleep," she said, pointing to an icon. "Mom said you've been having trouble sleeping." "Your mom's right about that," I admitted. Emma hesitated, then blurted, "Are you scared, Grandma?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. Children Emma's age were usually shielded from discussions of mortality, particularly in Thomas's household, where difficult emotions were treated as impolite intrusions. "Yes," I answered honestly. "I'm scared of the treatment. I'm scared it might not work. I'm scared of leaving you all too soon." Emma nodded, absorbing this. I'd be scared too. She reached for my hand, her slender fingers cool against my skin. "But you're really strong. Mom always says you're the strongest person she knows." From the kitchen, Jennifer called, "I'm just stating facts. My mother is basically Wonder Woman in sensible shoes." A laugh bubbled up from some long untapped source within me. "Wonder Woman, is it? I don't recall having an invisible jet." "The Camry counts," Jennifer insisted, appearing in the doorway. "That thing survived 3 fender benders and a flash flood. It's practically supernatural." Emma smiled, a rare full smile that transformed her serious face. "Mom says you fought off a raccoon with a broom once to protect her pet rabbit." "That raccoon was the size of a small bear," I confirmed, and utterly determined to have Thumper for dinner. "See?" Jennifer flopped onto the couch beside us. "Wonder Woman." The 3 of us sat together, trading stories and laughing, the shadow of my diagnosis temporarily pushed to the periphery of the room. I studied them as we talked. Jennifer with her animated gestures and ready laugh, so much like Richard. Emma with her quiet intensity, her artist's way of seeing the world. "Have you told Thomas about the financial counseling appointment?" Jennifer asked eventually, the question I'd been expecting finally surfacing. "Not yet," I admitted. "I thought I'd wait until I have a concrete plan in place." Jennifer and Emma exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," Jennifer said quickly. "It's just Aiden texted Emma last night. Apparently, Uncle Thomas bought a new golf club membership." Emma nodded. $15,000 initiation fee, plus monthly dues. Aiden was bragging about the fancy locker rooms. The information landed like a physical blow. $15,000 for golf, but only $5,000 for his mother's cancer treatment. "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady. Jennifer reached for my hand. "Mom, let me help, please. Not my whole savings if you won't accept that, but something." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The faint worry lines around her eyes, the slight slump of fatigue in her shoulders from working overnight shifts, the determination in her expression, so reminiscent of my own. "Okay," I conceded. "We'll figure out a plan together. But," I added firmly, "I'm still meeting with Harriet about the will. That's non-negotiable." "The will?" Emma asked. "Why do you need to change your will now?" Jennifer and I exchanged a glance. "Because," I said carefully, "it's always good to make sure your affairs are in order during major life changes. And because sometimes people show you exactly who they are, and you need to believe them." Harriet Green's law office occupied the second floor of a Victorian house just off Oak Ridge's town square. I'd known Harriet since we were both young, mothers navigating PTA meetings and soccer carpools. Now her hair was silver, her reading glasses perched on a beaded chain around her neck, but her sharp intelligence remained unchanged. "Cancer," she said when I'd finished explaining my situation. "Damn it, Barbara." "My thoughts exactly," I replied. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. "And Thomas refused to help financially?" $5,000, like a generous tip for good service. Harriet's expression darkened. "The same Thomas who called me last year to inquire about setting up a trust to protect his assets from future inheritance taxes." This was news to me. "He did?" She nodded. "He was quite concerned about preserving his wealth for Aiden and Sophie. Very forward-thinking." Her tone made it clear what she thought of this foresight now. "Well," I said, "that makes my decision easier." For the next hour, Harriet and I reviewed my current will, a simple document leaving everything equally to Thomas and Jennifer, and discussed alternatives. As we talked, a new vision began to take shape, one that felt both radical and absolutely right. "Are you sure about this?" Harriet asked when we'd finished outlining the changes. "It's a significant departure." I thought about Thomas's text messages, about Pamela's visit, about the golf membership. I thought about Jennifer and Emma in my living room, offering not just financial help, but their time, their love, their steady presence. "I'm sure," I said. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time." Harriet made some final notes, then set down her pen. "I'll have this drawn up by next week. But Barbara," she added, her voice gentling, "I hope you outlive all of us, and this document sits in my files gathering dust for decades." "From your lips to God's ears," I said, getting to my feet. "But if not, at least I'll go knowing I've done right by the people who truly showed up for me." On the drive home, I felt lighter than I had since receiving my diagnosis. The future remained frightening and uncertain, but for the first time, I felt fully in control of my response to it. I wasn't a passive recipient of fate anymore. I was actively shaping what would come after, whatever after meant. At a red light, I made a spontaneous decision and turned left instead of right, heading toward Crescent Park Municipal Pool. For 30 summers, I'd taught swimming lessons there to supplement my teacher's salary. The familiar scent of chlorine and sunscreen greeted me as I parked, memories washing over me as powerfully as the waves in the deep end. Richard teaching Thomas to swim, his patient hands supporting our son's small body as he practiced floating. Jennifer's triumph when she finally conquered her fear of the diving board, her cannonball splash soaking everyone nearby. Family picnics. On the grassy hill beside the pool, watermelon juice sticky on small fingers, fireflies appearing as dusk fell. I hadn't been swimming in years. Suddenly, irrationally, it seemed vitally important to feel that weightless freedom again. The college-aged attendant at the entrance smiled as I paid the senior admission fee. "Lane 3 is open," she said. "The water's perfect today." In the women's locker room, I changed into the swimsuit I kept in my gym bag for water aerobics classes I repeatedly signed up for, but rarely attended. The mirror showed me my body, softer now, marked by time and childbearing and the small surgical scars from my kidney donation. Soon there would be new scars, new changes as the cancer treatment took its toll. But today, this body could still carry me through water. I swam for 30 minutes, my strokes rusty at first, then finding their rhythm. With each lap, I felt my resolve strengthening. I would fight the cancer with everything I had. I would accept help from those who offered it freely and without condition. I would set boundaries with those who didn't. And I would live whatever time I had left on my own terms. When I finally pulled myself from the pool, pleasantly exhausted, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Thomas and a text message. "Need to talk about your treatment plan. Found a clinical trial that might cover costs. Call me." Still no acknowledgement of his inadequate offer. Still no recognition of how his response had hurt me. I didn't call him back. Instead, I drove to Jennifer's apartment, where I had been invited for dinner. Emma opened the door, her face lighting up at the sight of me. "Grandma, Mom's making enchiladas. I told her you like the green sauce better than the red." "You remembered that?" I asked, touched. Emma rolled her eyes. "Obviously. I remember everything you like." Inside, Jennifer was singing along to the radio as she chopped cilantro, her small kitchen fragrant with cumin and lime. When she saw me, she did a double take. "Mom, your hair is wet. Did you go swimming?" "I did," I confirmed. "First time in years." Jennifer studied my face. "Something's different about you. You seem free," I supplied. "I feel free." And as Emma set the table and Jennifer pulled the enchiladas from the oven, I realized it was true. Cancer had taken much from me already, and would take more. But it had given me something precious in return: the clarity to see who truly valued me, and the courage to value myself. The next week passed in a blur of medical appointments and paperwork. The hospital's financial counselor, a compassionate woman named Delia, helped me navigate the maze of insurance claims, assistance programs, and payment plans. I qualified for a grant from a cancer foundation that would cover part of my expenses. My home equity line of credit was approved. And Jennifer, despite my protests, deposited $5,000 into my account with a note that simply read, "Non-negotiable. Love you." Thomas called twice more. I let both calls go to voicemail. His messages were variations on the same theme. He'd researched options for me. He wanted to discuss a plan. He'd spoken to a colleague whose mother had participated in a clinical trial with promising results. Not once did he say, "I was wrong," or "I want to help more." Not once did he acknowledge the wound he'd inflicted. I was finishing my morning coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Thomas standing on my porch, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, his expression a mix of annoyance and concern. For a moment, I considered not answering. Then I thought of the Barbara from that newspaper clipping, the one who faced difficult situations head-on, and opened the door. "Mom," Thomas said, relief washing over his face. "Why haven't you been answering my calls? I've been worried." "Have you?" I stepped back to let him in, noting how he immediately loosened his tie, making himself at home in my living room as if nothing had changed between us. "Of course I have." He pulled out, his phone swiping through screens. "Look, I've been researching. There's a clinical trial at Mercy Hospital for exactly your type of breast cancer. All treatment costs are covered, and the outcomes look promising. I've already reached out to the coordinator. Thomas, I interrupted. I've made arrangements for my treatment. Traditional chemotherapy followed by surgery and radiation. It starts next week. He looked up, frowning. But how are you paying for it? The clinical trial would save you. Save me money, I finished for him. Not necessarily provide the best treatment for my specific situation. Mom, be reasonable. These trials are cutting-edge medicine. They're also experimental, with unknown side effects and no guaranteed outcomes. I sat down in my armchair, facing him directly. I've consulted with 3 oncologists. This is the treatment plan they all recommended. But the cost is being handled, I said firmly. I've received a grant, taken out a home equity line of credit, and made payment arrangements with the hospital. Thomas's expression shifted from confusion to something closer to alarm. A home equity line? Mom, that's putting your house at key risk. I'm aware of that. But there are other options. If you'd just let me help you plan. Plan what, Thomas? How to minimize the financial impact on you. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I didn't retract them. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. That's not fair, I offered to help. $5,000, I said, against a $70,000 need, while simultaneously buying a $15,000 golf membership. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. How did you... He stopped, understanding dawning. Emma and Aiden. Does it matter how I... No? It's true, isn't it? Thomas stood, pacing to the window and back. Mom, my finances are complicated. The golf membership is a business expense, essentially. It's where I make connections, build relationships with clients. And your mother's cancer treatment is what? A discretionary expense? That's not what I meant. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard that my heart twisted despite everything. Look, I want to help. I do. But I have responsibilities. The mortgage, the kids' college funds, retirement planning. I understand responsibilities, I said quietly. I also understand priorities. Thomas turned to face me, his expression hardening slightly. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that I've made my decisions about how to handle this situation, just as you've made yours. He studied me, sensing something beneath my words. There's something else, isn't there? What aren't you telling me? I took a deep breath. I've updated my will. The silence that followed was profound. Thomas stared at me, processing. Updated how, exactly? That's private for now. I kept my voice level, but I wanted you to know that changes have been made. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Because I couldn't give you $35,000 on demand? No, Thomas. Because when I needed you, really needed you, you showed me exactly where I stand in your list of priorities, right below a golf membership. He flushed, anger and embarrassment warring on his face. That's completely unfair. You're twisting things. Am I? Tell me honestly. If you hadn't known I'd found out about the golf club, would you have mentioned it to me? Would you have reconsidered your offer? His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said softly. So this is punishment. His voice was flat. You're using your will to punish me. No, Thomas. I'm using my will to reward those who have shown up for me, who have offered what they have without condition or complaint, and to protect them from those who haven't. Jennifer, he said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. Always perfect Jennifer. Jennifer, who offered me her entire savings when she barely has enough to cover her own expenses. Jennifer, who visits me 3 times a week just to check in. Jennifer, who treats me like a mother, not an obligation. Thomas turned away, his shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, professional, the voice he probably used in difficult negotiations at work. "I'd like to know what changes you've made. I think I have a right to that information." "You don't, actually, but I'll tell you anyway, since you're here." I folded my hands in my lap, steadying myself. "The house will go to Jennifer, along with half of my remaining assets. The other half will establish a scholarship fund for students pursuing education degrees." His face went pale, then flushed dark red. "Nothing for me? Nothing for my children?" "I've set aside funds for Aiden and Sophie's education to be held in trust until they're of age. The trustee will be Jennifer, not you." "This is..." He seemed at a loss for words. "Mom, you can't be serious. Over one disagreement? One time I couldn't give you what you wanted?" "It wasn't about the money, Thomas. It never was. It was about seeing me as your mother, as someone who has given to you endlessly, sacrificed for you repeatedly, and who needed you to show up just once with the same generosity. And you couldn't do it." He stared at me, a strange mix of emotions, crossing his face: anger, confusion, hurt, and something that might have been guilt, quickly suppressed. "I need to think about this. We both need to calm down and talk when we're more rational." "I am completely rational," I assured him. "But yes, you should think about it. Carefully." Thomas gathered his things, movements stiff with barely contained emotion. At the door, he paused, turning back. "I do love you, Mom, despite what you think." "I believe you do in your way," I said gently. "But love isn't just a feeling, Thomas. It's what you do when someone needs you." After he left, I sat in my living room for a long time, mentally reviewing our conversation. Had I been too harsh? Perhaps. But there was a clarity in finally speaking my truth, in refusing to shrink myself to accommodate his comfort. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Dinner tonight? Emma made vegetable soup from scratch, and she's insufferably proud of it." I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. Tell her to save me a big bowl." The first day of chemotherapy arrived with a brilliant sunrise, the September sky painted in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost defiant in their beauty. I stood at my kitchen window, watching light spill across my garden, wondering how many more such mornings I would see. "Stop it," I told myself firmly. "One day at a time." Jennifer arrived at 7:30, thermos of ginger tea in hand. "Ready?" she asked, her voice carefully upbeat. "As I'll ever be," I replied, gathering my purse and the canvas tote bag I'd packed with a book, a soft blanket, and comfortable socks. Everything the cancer support group had suggested bringing to treatment. The oncology center was busier than I'd expected, filled with people of all ages sitting in recliners, IV poles stationed beside them like silent sentinels. Some were alone, some had companions. All wore the same expression, a mixture of determination and resignation that I recognized from my own mirror. A nurse named Martina showed us to my assigned station, expertly inserting the IV line while explaining each step in a soothing voice. "First time?" she asked, noting my tense posture. I nodded. "You've got good support," she said, smiling at Jennifer, who was arranging my blanket and unpacking the thermos. "That makes all the difference." As Martina started the drip, I thought of all the people who had shown up for me since my diagnosis. Jennifer and Emma, of course. My neighbor Frank, who had quietly started mowing my lawn without being asked. The women from my book club who had organized a meal train. Even Marianne Potter, my former student, who had called immediately after hearing about my diagnosis through our small town's grapevine, offering to fly in from Seattle if I needed her. I thought of Thomas too, and felt a pang of sadness. He hadn't called since our confrontation. Neither had Pamela. My grandchildren Aiden and Sophie had sent a card, store-bought, signed with their names and nothing else, clearly orchestrated by their mother as a perfunctory gesture. "Mom?" Jennifer's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "You okay? You look sad." "Just thinking," I said, squeezing her hand. "About family, about choices." Jennifer nodded, understanding. "Have you heard from Thomas?" "No, not since I told him about the will." She sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "He'll come around, eventually." "Maybe," I said, not believing it. "But that's not what matters right now. What matters is getting through this treatment and coming out the other side." "One day at a time," Jennifer agreed, echoing my earlier thought. "1 hour at a time some days," I amended, feeling the unfamiliar chemicals beginning their journey through my veins. The chemo hit me harder than I'd anticipated. By evening, I was curled on my bathroom floor, waves of nausea washing over me despite the antiemetic medications. Jennifer had wanted to stay, but I'd insisted she go home to Emma. Now, pressing my cheek against the cool tiles, I regretted my stubbornness. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, someone was gently lifting me. I opened my eyes to find Frank, my 70-year-old neighbor, his weathered face creased with concern. "Jennifer called," he explained, helping me to my bed. "Asked me to check on you when you didn't answer your phone." I wanted to thank him, but another wave of nausea hit, and all I could do was point weakly toward the bathroom. Frank didn't hesitate, supporting me as I stumbled back to the toilet. When I finished, he handed me a damp washcloth for my face and a glass of water to rinse my mouth. "My Elaine went through this," he said quietly. "Cancer's a mean beast. But you're meaner, Barbara Wilson." I managed a weak smile. "Not feeling very mean right now. That's just the chemicals talking." He helped me back to bed, tucking the covers around me with surprising gentleness for a man who'd spent 40 years working construction. "Jennifer's on her way. Said to tell you she's spending the night and not to argue." "Wouldn't dream of it," I murmured, already drifting into an exhausted sleep. The days blurred together after that. Chemo on Mondays, nausea and exhaustion Tuesday through Thursday, a gradual return to something resembling normalcy Friday through Sunday. Then the cycle began again. My hair started falling out in clumps after the second treatment. I woke one morning to find my pillow covered in silver gray strands. Rather than watch it disappear gradually, I asked Jennifer to shave it off. "Are you sure?" she asked, clippers in hand, her expression uncertain. "Positive," I said, sitting on a kitchen chair draped with a towel. "I want it on my terms." As the buzz of the clippers filled the room and my remaining hair fell to the floor, I felt another piece of my former self falling away. The Barbara Wilson who had taught third grade for 30 years, who had baked cookies for PTA meetings and chaperoned field trips, who had defined herself as a teacher, a wife, a mother, she was disappearing. In her place was emerging a woman I was just getting to know. Bare-headed, clear-eyed, unburdened by others' expectations. Emma, watching from the doorway, stepped forward when Jennifer finished. "You look badass, Grandma," she declared, her teenage bluntness making me laugh despite everything. "Language," Jennifer admonished automatically, but she was smiling too. "She's right, though," I said, running a hand over my newly smooth scalp. "I do look rather badass." Emma produced a small package from behind her back. "I got you something." Inside was a soft knit beanie in a rich teal color that matched my eyes. "For when you're cold," she explained. "But honestly, you should just rock the bald look. It's powerful." I hugged her, this remarkable granddaughter who could see beauty in her grandmother's illness-ravaged appearance. "Thank you, sweetheart." That night, after Jennifer and Emma had gone home, I stood before my bathroom mirror, really studying my reflection. Without hair, my features seemed starker, more defined. My cheekbones stood out prominently. My eyes looked larger. I'd lost weight, my collarbones visible beneath my skin. But there was something else there too, a certain dignity, a quiet strength in the set of my jaw, the directness of my gaze. "Hello, Barbara," I whispered to my reflection. "Nice to meet you." I was midway through my third round of chemo when Harriet called to tell me the revised will was ready for signing. We arranged to meet at her office the following week during what would hopefully be one of my better days. The night before our appointment, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Wilson?" a young voice asked when I answered. "It's Aiden." "Aiden?" I sat up straighter, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." He sounded nervous, speaking quietly as if afraid of being overheard. "I'm calling about Dad." My heart beat faster. "What about him?" "He's been really weird since he came back from your house that day. Like angry all the time, but also sad. Mom says not to bother him, that he's dealing with adult issues. But..." He trailed off, uncertain. "But what, Aiden?" "But I heard them arguing about you, about your will. Dad was saying it's unfair, that Emma's going to get everything and Sophie and I are getting nothing." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "That's not accurate, Aiden. You and Sophie will have funds set aside for your education." "That's what I thought," he said, sounding relieved. "Dad's not always. He sometimes makes things sound different than they are." "Yes," I agreed carefully. "He does. Anyway, I just wanted to know if you're okay, and to say I'm sorry about the cancer. That really sucks." The simple, teenage expression of sympathy brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Aiden. That means a lot. And, one more thing." His voice dropped even lower. "I found this box in Dad's office, with all these old pictures of you and him from when he was a kid. He was looking at them the other night when he thought everyone was asleep. I think he misses you, Grandma, even if he's being a jerk." After we hung up, I sat in my darkened living room, turning Aiden's words over in my mind. Thomas, secretly looking at old photographs, arguing with Pamela about the will, being weird, angry, and sad. Was it possible I'd misjudged him? Was there more to his reaction than simple selfishness? The thought nagged at me as I drove to Harriet's office the next day. It was still there as I reviewed the final document, explicit in its new provisions. The house and half my assets to Jennifer, education trusts for all 3 grandchildren, the remaining half of my assets to establish the Barbara Wilson Education Scholarship. "Are you still certain about this?" Harriet asked, pen poised above the witness line. I hesitated, thinking of Aiden's call, of Thomas looking at old photographs in the middle of the night. "I'm certain about most of it," I said slowly. "But I'd like to make one change." Harriet raised an eyebrow. "What change?" "I want to include a personal letter to Thomas, to be given to him along with the will. And," I paused, considering, "I want to add a small provision for him. Not money, but something personal. Something that might help him understand." A knowing smile touched Harriet's lips. "I think that can be arranged." 3 days later, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a blank piece of stationery. How do you summarize a lifetime of love, disappointment, hope, and hurt in a single letter? How do you reach across the gulf that has opened between you and the child you once carried? In your body, the one whose small hand once held yours with complete trust. I picked up my pen and began to write. Dear Thomas, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've just learned of the changes I made to my will. You're hurt, probably angry, and feeling betrayed. I understand those feelings. I felt them too. The day you told me my life wasn't worth rearranging your financial priorities. But this letter isn't about punishment. It's about truth, the kind we should have spoken to each other while I was still here. The truth is, I've always been proud of you, proud of your drive, your success, your sharp mind. When you graduated from business school, when you bought your first house, When you made vice president, my heart swelled with each accomplishment. Every good thing that happened to you felt like vindication for all the sacrifices your father and I made. But somewhere along the way, I think those accomplishments became more important than the values that were supposed to underpin them. The drive for success overshadowed empathy. Financial security became more important than family security. I'm not writing this to make you feel guilty. I'm writing because I want you to understand what I've learned through this illness. That at the end, the only wealth that matters is the love you've given and received. The only security that counts is knowing you showed up for the people who needed you. With this letter, you'll receive the photo albums from your childhood. They're yours now. Look through them, Thomas. Remember the boy who once made me dandelion crowns, who cried when he accidentally stepped on a snail, who gave his allowance to a classmate who couldn't afford the field trip fee. That boy is still part of you, beneath the suits and the spreadsheets, and the careful financial planning. I forgive you for not being able to help me when I needed it. I hope someday you'll forgive yourself. With love, always. Mom. I sealed the letter in an envelope, wrote Thomas's name on the front, and paperclipped it to my amended will. Whether it would make any difference, I couldn't know. But I'd spoken my truth with love instead of anger. That would have to be enough. The next morning, as I waited in the oncology center for my 4th round of chemo, my phone buzzed with a text message from Thomas. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. After a moment, I typed, yes, 10 a.m., I'll make coffee. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the same clarity and courage that had carried me this far. One day at a time. One conversation at a time. One truth at a time. The morning of my appointment with Harriet to sign the amended will, I woke to the sound of rain drumming against my bedroom window. A fitting soundtrack, I thought, for what felt like one of the most consequential days of my life. A day when I would formally acknowledge the painful truth about my relationship with my son and protect those who had proven worthy of my trust. I dressed with particular care, choosing a forest green blouse that Jennifer had bought me last Christmas. It brings out your eyes, Mom, she'd said, and though I'd lost weight since then, making the blouse hang a bit loose on my frame, the color still offered a welcome contrast to my pallor. I covered my head with a patterned silk scarf, secured my comfortable flats, and grabbed an umbrella from the stand by the front door. The rain had intensified by the time I pulled into the small parking lot behind Harriet's office, fat droplets, hammering the roof of my Camry with surprising force. I sat for a moment, watching the water stream down my windshield, gathering my resolve. Then I took a deep breath, opened my umbrella, and made the dash to the building's rear entrance. Harriet was waiting for me in her office, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the documents spread across her desk. She looked up as I entered, her sharp eyes taking in my appearance with the assessing gaze of an old friend. "Barbara," she greeted me, rising to help me with my wet umbrella. "You're looking stronger today." "I feel stronger," I admitted, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Clearer." She nodded approvingly. "Clarity is good, especially for what we're doing today." She pulled several documents from a folder, arranging them precisely before me. "I've made the changes we discussed. The house and half your assets to Jennifer, education trusts for all 3 grandchildren, and the remaining half to establish the scholarship fund in your name." "And the letter for Thomas?" "Ready to be attached to his copy of the will." She paused, studying me. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Barbara? There's no legal obligation to be completely equitable, but there can be emotional fallout." "I'm certain," I said, with more conviction than I'd felt in months. "Thomas made his choice. This is mine." Harriet nodded, seemingly satisfied with my resolve. She walked me through each section of the document, explaining legal terms and implications with practiced ease. Finally, she handed me her pen, a weighty silver instrument that had probably witnessed thousands of similar moments of decision. I signed my name on each indicated line, the strokes firm and unhesitating. When I finished, Harriet added her own signature as witness, then called in her assistant to provide a second signature. "There," she said when we'd completed the formalities. "It's done. I'll file the original in our secure vault and send copies to you for your records." "Thank you, Harriet," I said, feeling an unexpected lightness, "for everything." She walked me to the door, her hand warm on my shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Barbara, and call me anytime. For legal matters," she added with a small smile. "Or just to chat. We don't do enough of that these days." Outside, the rain had subsided to a gentle mist, soft and cleansing. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, face tilted up to feel the cool moisture on my skin, savoring the sense of having taken control of at least one aspect of my uncertain future. My phone buzzed in my purse. Thomas. Again. I let it go to voicemail, as I had with his previous 3 calls since our last meeting. Whatever justifications or explanations he wanted to offer would have to wait. Today was about my choices, not his. Instead, I drove to the small coffee shop near the hospital where Jennifer worked, planning to surprise her during her break. The rain had cleared completely by the time I arrived, leaving behind that particular freshness that follows a good storm. The world washed clean, at least momentarily. Jennifer was already there, sitting at a corner table with a steaming mug and a medical journal open before her. Her face registered surprise, followed quickly by concern when she spotted me. "Mom, is everything okay? Did something happen with your appointment?" "Everything's fine," I assured her, settling into the chair opposite. "The appointment went exactly as planned. I just thought I'd surprise you." Her eyes narrowed slightly, unconvinced. "You're sure? You look different." "Good different or bad different?" "Good, I think." She studied me more carefully. "You seem more, I don't know, centered? Like something's been resolved." I smiled at her perception. Jennifer had always been attuned to emotional undercurrents, even as a child. "I signed the amended will today," I explained. "It's official now." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Oh, and you're feeling relieved," I said honestly. "Like I've finally acknowledged the truth of the situation and acted accordingly." Jennifer reached across the table to take my hand, her expression troubled. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Thomas called me last night." This was unexpected. "He did? What did he want?" "To talk about you, about the situation." She hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully. He sounded different, subdued. He asked how you were doing with the treatments, whether I thought he should keep trying to reach you or give you space. "And what did you tell him?" I asked, curious despite myself. "That you're handling the treatments, as well as can be expected, and that I didn't know what you needed from him right now." She squeezed my hand gently. "It's not my place to mediate between you two, Mom. But I think maybe he's genuinely trying to understand what he did wrong." I sighed, feeling the weight of complicated emotions. "It's a little late for that, don't you think?" "Maybe," Jennifer acknowledged. "But..." She trailed off, seemingly reluctant to continue. "But what?" I prompted. "But people can change. Sometimes it takes a shock, like nearly losing someone, to wake them up." Her voice softened. "I'm not defending what he did, Mom. It was selfish and hurtful. I'm just saying that if he's genuinely trying to make amends, it might be worth at least hearing him out." I studied my daughter, this compassionate woman who had every reason to harbor resentment toward her brother, yet was still willing to consider his perspective. It was one of the qualities I admired most in her, her capacity for empathy, even toward those who hadn't earned it. "I'll think about it," I promised, not quite ready to commit to more. Jennifer nodded, accepting this. "That's all I'm asking." She glanced at her watch. "I've got to get back for afternoon rounds. Are you coming to dinner tomorrow?" Emma's trying out a new pasta recipe she found online. "I wouldn't miss it," I assured her. "Tell her to make extra for leftovers. Her cooking has been better than any anti-nausea medication." Jennifer laughed, gathering her things. "I'll tell her you said that. It'll make her day." She kissed my cheek before heading toward the door. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too," I called after her, watching as she hurried across the street toward the hospital, her nurse's uniform just visible beneath her open coat. Alone at the table, I considered her words about Thomas. Was he genuinely trying to make amends, or simply concerned about his inheritance now that he knew I'd changed my will? The cynical part of me, the part still raw from his rejection, leaned toward the latter. But another part, perhaps the teacher in me who had always believed in the capacity for growth and change, whispered that people sometimes did learn from their mistakes. The question was whether I was ready to give him the chance to prove which was true. I was still mulling this over when my phone buzzed again. Not Thomas this time, but a text from Frank, my neighbor. "Package delivery left on your porch. Looks important. Want me to bring it inside in case of rain?" I texted back a quick affirmative, thanking him for keeping an eye on things. Frank had been checking on my house regularly on treatment days, bringing in mail and packages, making sure everything was secure. Another person who had shown up for me without hesitation, without condition. By the time I arrived home, Frank had placed the package on my kitchen table, a large flat rectangle wrapped in brown paper and bearing the return address of a framing shop in the next town over. I stared at it, puzzled. I hadn't ordered anything framed recently. Curious, I carefully removed the brown paper to reveal a simple black frame containing a newspaper clipping I immediately recognized. The article about my kidney donation to Marianne Potter's father all those years ago. The yellowed paper had been carefully preserved behind glass, the headline still clear: "Local teacher donates kidney to student's father." But how? I'd just been looking at this clipping in my photo album, tucked between the pages. A small card fell from the wrapping paper. I picked it up, immediately recognizing the precise architectural handwriting. "Mom, Aiden mentioned you'd been looking at old photos and keepsakes. I hope you don't mind, but I found this while helping Emma with a school project about family. Heroes. She wanted to include it in her presentation, and I thought you might like to have it properly preserved. You've always kept the mementos of everyone else's achievements. It seemed time someone did the same for one of yours. Thomas." I sat down heavily at the kitchen table, running my fingers over the frame. It was a thoughtful gesture, unexpectedly. So, not grand or expensive like a golf club membership, but personal, meaningful, a recognition of something I'd done that had mattered, that had reflected the values I'd tried to instill in my children. Had I misjudged him? Or was this another attempt to manipulate the situation, to curry favor now that he knew his inheritance was at stake? The cynical voice in my head was quieter this time, drowned out by the memory of Thomas as a child, his face lighting up when he'd proudly presented me with handmade gifts, macaroni necklaces, crayon drawings, a lopsided clay pot from art class that I'd used as a pencil holder until it finally crumbled apart decades later. He'd always put thought into gifts, even when he had nothing but time and construction paper to offer. Perhaps there was still a trace of that thoughtful boy in the man he'd become. My thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. Through the peephole, I saw Marianne Potter herself standing on my porch, a bouquet of autumn flowers in her arms. Surprised, I opened the door. "Marianne! What a lovely surprise!" She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that reminded me poignantly of her father. "Mrs. Wilson, I was in town visiting my cousin and thought I'd stop by to see how you're doing." I ushered her inside, touched by the coincidental timing of her visit, just as I'd been contemplating the framed article about her father. "I'm doing as well as can be expected," I told her, taking the flowers with thanks. "The treatments are difficult, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic." Marianne followed me to the kitchen, where I began arranging the flowers in a vase. Her eyes immediately fell on the framed newspaper article. "Oh!" she exclaimed, reaching for it with gentle fingers. "I have this same article at home. Dad kept a copy in his wallet until the day he died." Her eyes met mine, suddenly swimming with tears. "He never stopped being grateful, you know. None of us did." "It was the right thing to do," I said simply. She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "That's exactly what you said back then, when everyone was calling you a hero. It was just the right thing to do. But Mrs. Wilson, do you know how rare that is? For someone to do the right thing when it's difficult, when it requires real sacrifice?" I thought of Jennifer, offering her entire savings without hesitation. Of Emma, researching ways to ease chemo side effects instead of focusing on typical teenage concerns. Of Frank, checking on my house and bringing in my mail without being asked. And yes, even of Thomas, who might, just might, be trying to find his way back to the person I'd raised him to be. "Not as rare as you might think," I said softly. "There are still good people in the world." Marianne stayed for tea, updating me on her life, her 2 children, her work as a pediatric nurse inspired by her father's medical journey, her recent volunteer trip to build houses in Honduras. As she spoke, I found myself thinking about legacy, about the ripple effects of our actions that continue long after we're gone. If my small act of donating a kidney had influenced Marianne to become a nurse, to volunteer, to raise children with a strong sense of service, what ripples had my other actions created? What lessons had Thomas and Jennifer carried forward from their childhoods in my home? What values would they, in turn, pass on to their own children? After Marianne left, promising to visit again soon, I found myself drawn to the photo albums. I'd been examining the night I discovered the newspaper clipping. This time, instead of focusing on Thomas's childhood, I paged further ahead, to his college graduation, his wedding to Pamela, the birth of Aiden, and later Sophie. There he was, cradling newborn Aiden with a look of wonder and terror I recognized from Richard's face when he'd first held Thomas. There he was again, patiently teaching 5-year-old Sophie to ride a bike, his hands steadying the seat as she wobbled forward. And again, beaming with pride at Aiden's science fair victory, his arm around his son's shoulders. These weren't the actions of a man incapable of love or generosity. They were the actions of a flawed human being who, like all of us, sometimes lost his way, forgot his values, made choices he'd later regret. The question remained: was his recent reaching out, the framed article, the calls, the conversation with Jennifer, evidence of genuine remorse and desire to change, or merely a strategic response to the threat of disinheritance? There was only one way to find out. I reached for my phone and typed a brief message. "Thank you for the framed article. It was thoughtful. I'm available to talk tomorrow morning if you'd like to come by." His response came almost immediately. "I'll be there at 10. Thank you, Mom." The formality of the response made me smile despite everything. Always proper, always composed. That was Thomas. Or at least the Thomas he presented to the world. I wondered if I might catch a glimpse of the more vulnerable man beneath that carefully maintained facade. That night, as I prepared for bed, I found myself standing before the mirror in my bathroom, really looking at myself. The changes wrought by chemo were evident: the headscarf covering my baldness, the pronounced hollows beneath my cheekbones, the papery thinness of my skin. But my eyes were clear and steady, reflecting a strength I hadn't been sure I still possessed. "You can do this," I told my reflection. "You can hear him out without compromising your boundaries. You can be open to the possibility of change without guaranteeing forgiveness. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with quiet resolve. The will was signed. The hard decisions had been made. Whatever came next, I would face it with clarity and courage. Thomas arrived at precisely 10 o'clock the next morning, the punctuality so characteristic that it almost made me smile. Through the kitchen window, I watched him approach the front door. Noting that he'd parked his Tesla in the driveway rather than at the curb, a small detail, but one that suggested he wasn't positioning himself for a quick exit this time. He was dressed casually in khakis and a navy blue sweater, his usual corporate armor nowhere in evidence. When I opened the door, his eyes widened slightly as they took in my appearance, but he quickly masked his reaction. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than I was accustomed to hearing it. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I gestured for him to come in, leading the way to the kitchen where I'd prepared coffee and set out a plate of the shortbread cookies Emma had dropped off the day before. We settled across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd done homework, where we'd shared countless family meals, where I'd told him about his father's heart attack 10 years ago. The familiar setting seemed to underscore how much had changed between us. Thomas wrapped his hands around his coffee mug but didn't drink. "You look," he began, then trailed off, clearly unsure how to complete the sentence without acknowledging the visible toll of the cancer treatment. "Like a cancer patient," I supplied matter-of-factly. "It's okay to say it. I'm well aware of how I look these days." He nodded, a flash of what looked like genuine pain crossing his features. "How are the treatments going?" "About as expected. Some days are better than others. Today is one of the better ones." "I'm glad," he said, and it sounded sincere. He took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation. About what you said. About the will. About priorities. About everything." I waited, not rushing to fill the silence. This was his moment to speak, to explain himself if he could. "I didn't handle things well when you told me about the cancer," he continued. "About the financial need. I was wrong." The admission hung in the air between us, so simple yet so difficult for him to say. I took a sip of my coffee, still not interrupting. "It wasn't really about the money," he went on, his eyes now fixed on his untouched coffee. "I mean, yes, $35,000 is a lot, but we could have managed it. It was more about—" He struggled, searching for words to explain something he might not fully understand himself. I think I was scared. "Scared?" I prompted quietly. "Of losing you." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, a rare show of emotion from my always controlled son. "When you told me about the diagnosis, it was like the floor dropped out from under me. But instead of facing that fear, I went into problem-solving mode. Clinical trials, financial planning, things I could control, things that wouldn't force me to confront what was really happening." I thought of the photographs Aiden had mentioned, of Thomas looking through old family albums in the middle of the night. "Fear makes us do strange things," I acknowledged. "It's more than that," he admitted, finally meeting my eyes. "The way I've been living my life, the focus on money, on status, on appearances, it's like I've been building this perfect fortress around myself. As if having enough money and the right connections could somehow keep the bad things at bay." "And then your mother got cancer and needed financial help," I said softly. "And it shattered the illusion," he agreed. "Reminded me that no amount of money can really keep us safe." That was uncomfortable. "So you pushed it away? Pushed me away?" He nodded, looking genuinely miserable. "I'm not proud of it, of how I responded, of the person I've become." I reached across the table and took his hand, feeling an unfamiliar callus on his palm. "Thank you for telling me this," I said. "There's more," he continued, sitting up straighter, his shoulders squaring with resolve. I want to pay for your treatments, all of them. I've already spoken to the hospital's billing department about it. I withdrew my hand, wariness returning. Thomas! Please, Mom. The intensity in his voice stopped me. Let me do this. Not because I'm trying to change your mind about the will, though I'd be lying if I said I don't care about that, but because it's the right thing to do. Because you're my mother, and I love you, and I should have done this from the beginning. I studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity. What about your commitments? The pool, Aiden's college visits, Sophie's orthodontist bills? A flush crept up his neck. We'll manage. Some things are more important. And Pamela, what does she think about this? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Pamela and I have been reassessing our priorities, separately for now. This caught me completely off guard. Are you saying... We're taking some time apart, he confirmed. It's been coming for a while. Your situation just brought a lot of things into sharper focus. I absorbed this news, feeling a complex mixture of sadness for his marital troubles and a guilty sense of validation. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be, he said with the ghost of a smile. It's been educational, actually. I'm staying in a small apartment downtown, cooking for myself, doing my own laundry, things I haven't done since college. That explained the callus on his palm. I realized, actual housework, perhaps for the first time in decades. And Aiden and Sophie? With Pamela, mostly. I see them on weekends. His expression softened. Aiden's been coming by more often, though, asking questions about values, about what really matters in life. He's a thoughtful boy, I observed, remembering his late-night call. He gets that from you, Thomas said quietly. That ability to see below the surface of things. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded check, placing it on the table between us. I'd like to do this, Mom. Please let me. I didn't need to look at the amount. Why now, Thomas? What's changed? He considered my question carefully. Remember Mr. Hernandez, my high school history teacher? I nodded, confused by the apparent non sequitur. I ran into him at the grocery store last month. He asked about you, about how you were doing with the cancer treatments. When I told him what was happening, he just looked at me with this disappointment. Then he asked what I was doing to help. Thomas shook his head at the memory. I made some excuse about work commitments and financial obligations, and he said, Your mother taught you better than that, son. That sounds like Frank Hernandez, I said, smiling faintly. He had always been direct with his students, never one to coddle them. He told me he volunteers at the downtown shelter every Tuesday night, said I should join him sometime. Thomas's lips quirked. I think I agreed just to end the uncomfortable conversation, but then he called me the next Monday to confirm. And somehow, I found myself there, serving soup to people who have nothing, listening to their stories. That must have been eye-opening, I said, trying to picture my finance executive son ladling soup in a homeless shelter. It was humbling, Thomas corrected. These people, many of them had once led comfortable lives. A bad illness, a job, loss, a mental health crisis. That's all it took for everything to fall apart. Their safety nets just vanished. He looked at me intently. It made me think about what a safety net really is. It's not a healthy investment portfolio or a prestigious job title. It's people who show up for you when everything falls apart. Like Jennifer, I couldn't help saying. Like Jennifer, he agreed, without the defensive tone I would have expected. And like you've always done for me, even when I didn't deserve it. He pushed the check closer to me. Please, Mom, let me be that for you now. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something new in his expression. A humility, a genuine remorse that went beyond mere words. The fortress he'd built around himself had indeed cracked, allowing glimpses of the compassionate boy he'd once been. "I'll accept your help," I said finally, "but only on one condition." "Anything," he said immediately. "I want you to come with me to my next treatment, to sit with me, to see what this is really like. Not to solve it or fix it or control it, just to be present for it." Thomas paled slightly, but nodded. "Of course. When is it?" "Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I'll be there," he promised. "And Mom, about the will." I held up a hand. "We don't need to discuss that right now. But I want you to know I understand why you made the changes." His voice was steady, though it clearly cost him effort. It wasn't about punishing me. It was about protecting Jennifer, about recognizing who really showed up when you needed support. "Yes," I said simply. "I'd like a chance to change that, to show up consistently, starting now." I looked into his eyes, Richard's eyes, with flecks of gold around the pupils, and saw genuine resolve. "One day at a time," I said. "One day at a time," he echoed. The framed newspaper article still sat on the kitchen table, a reminder of a time when doing the right thing had seemed so clear, so unquestionable. The path forward now wasn't nearly as straightforward, fraught as it was with hurt feelings and damaged trust. But perhaps, I thought, looking at my son's face, it was still possible to find our way back to something authentic, something true. Not the relationship we'd had before. That was gone, like so many other things cancer had taken from me. But maybe something new could grow in its place, something tempered by hard truths, yet still rooted in love. "More coffee?" I offered, reaching for the pot. Thomas smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that very much." Monday morning arrived with a clear sky and a biting chill that hinted at winter's approach. I layered myself in comfortable clothes, soft leggings, a long-sleeved thermal shirt, and the emerald green cardigan Emma had given me for good luck on treatment days. Over my bare head, I tied a silk scarf in shades of blue and green, a small act of dignity in the face of a disease that had stripped away so much. At precisely 8:30 a.m., a car pulled into my driveway. Not Thomas's sleek Tesla, but a modest gray Volvo. I watched through the window as he emerged, dressed in jeans and a navy sweater, a canvas tote bag slung over his shoulder. He looked different somehow, less polished, more human. I opened the door before he could knock. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar nervousness. "I brought some things, a blanket, some magazines, ginger tea. Jennifer mentioned they might be helpful." "You called Jennifer?" I asked, surprised. "Yesterday. I wanted to make sure I brought the right things." He shifted the bag from one shoulder to the other. "I hope that's okay." "It's fine," I assured him, touched by the thoughtfulness. "And thank you. Those will be perfect." The drive to the oncology center was quiet, neither of us quite ready for deep conversation. As we pulled into the parking lot, I noticed Thomas's knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. "It's okay to be nervous," I told him. "I'm nervous every time." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Inside, the familiar routine unfolded. Check-in, vital signs, the weigh-in that always made me wince as the number continued its downward trend. Thomas observed it all silently, occasionally making notes in his phone. Old habits died hard, I supposed. He was still the detail-oriented problem solver, even here. Martina, my regular nurse, raised an eyebrow at Thomas's presence as she led us to my usual station. "New support person today?" "My son," I explained. "Thomas, this is Martina. She's been taking excellent care of me." Thomas extended his hand. Thank you for that. I'm grateful. Martina gave him an appraising look, then nodded slightly, as if he'd passed some unspoken test. Let's get your mom settled in then. The next hour passed in the rhythmic beeping of machines, the quiet conversations of patients and caregivers, the gentle bustle of nurses moving from station to station. Thomas sat beside me, initially stiff and uncomfortable, then gradually relaxing as he observed the calm efficiency of the oncology team. Everyone here is so kind, he observed quietly. They see people on their worst days, I replied. Kindness becomes essential, not optional. As the chemo drugs began to flow, Thomas reached for my hand, a gesture so unexpected that I almost pulled away in surprise. His palm was warm against my cool fingers, steadying. Does it hurt? He asked, watching the clear liquid travel from the IV bag into my port. No, it just feels strange. Cold sometimes. I adjusted the blanket he'd brought, softer than the hospital-issued ones, in a shade of blue that matched my eyes. The side effects come later. He winced. How bad are they? Bad enough, I admitted, but manageable, with the right support. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the initial awkwardness between us giving way to something more comfortable. Thomas scrolled through emails on his phone one-handed, unwilling to release my hand even for that. I leafed through a magazine, not really reading, just appreciating the moment of connection. Mom, Thomas said suddenly, setting his phone aside. I've been offered a position at Oak Ridge Community College, teaching finance and business ethics. This was so unexpected that I simply stared at him. Teaching? You? He smiled ruefully. I know. It surprised me too. Mr. Hernandez suggested it. He knew they were looking for someone with real-world experience. The pay is. He grimaced. Let's just say it's an adjustment from corporate finance. But you're considering it? More than considering. I've accepted. His expression was a mixture of apprehension and excitement. I start in the spring semester. Thomas, that's... I searched for the right word. Brave. Or foolish, he added, with a self-deprecating smile. Time will tell. What does Pamela think? His smile faded. She thinks I'm having a midlife crisis, that I'll come to my senses eventually. And the children? Aiden thinks it's cool. Sophie's mortified that I might end up teaching one of her friends someday. His expression softened. But they're adapting. Kids are resilient that way. Yes, I agreed, thinking of Emma's quiet strength throughout my illness. They are. Thomas squeezed my hand gently. I wanted you to know first, before I told anyone else, because it was you who made me believe I could make a difference in students' lives. You showed me what that looks like. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, a rarity, as chemo had left me too dehydrated for easy crying. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning it absolutely. The remainder of the treatment passed in quiet conversation, Thomas sharing more details about his new path, me offering what advice I could from my years in the classroom. By the time Martina returned to disconnect the IV, we had sketched out ideas for his first lecture, planned a shopping trip for appropriate professor attire, and laughed more than we had in years. The nausea hit as we were driving home, a familiar wave that had me clutching the dashboard and breathing deeply through my nose. Thomas noticed immediately, pulling over without being asked. What do you need? He asked, anxiety evident in his voice. Just a minute, I managed, focusing on slow, steady breaths. It comes in waves. He waited patiently, one hand resting, lightly on my shoulder until the worst had passed. Better? I nodded. For now. Let's get home before the next wave. At the house, he helped me to the couch, tucking the same blue blanket around me with surprising tenderness. Tea? Water? Medication? All of the above, I said weakly. Anti-nausea pills are in the bathroom cabinet. He moved through my kitchen with newfound confidence, locating mugs, filling the kettle, finding the ginger tea bags Jennifer had stocked in my pantry. As I watched him, I marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. The corporate executive who'd once sneered at my financial choices was now caring for me with genuine concern, adapting to this new role with the same determination he'd applied to his career. "Here," he said, returning with tea and pills. "Jennifer texted. She's bringing some kind of special broth that's supposed to be good for chemo days. She has a collection of cancer comfort recipes," I explained, taking the medication gratefully. "Developed quite a specialty these past months." Thomas sat beside me, his expression thoughtful. "She's been here for all of this. Every treatment, every bad day." "Yes," I said simply. "She has. And I'm just showing up now, at the 11th hour." "Better late than never," I offered, but he shook his head. "No, Mom. It's not just about being late. It's about recognizing that what she's done can't be matched or equaled by a few weeks of effort on my part. It's about acknowledging that she earned her place in your life and in your will through consistent presence and sacrifice." I studied him, surprised by this insight. "That's very self-aware, Thomas." "I'm learning," he said wryly, slowly. The doorbell rang, and Thomas went to answer it. I heard the low murmur of his voice, then Jennifer's, their conversation, too quiet for me to make out the words. A moment later, they both appeared in the living room doorway, Jennifer carrying a thermos and a small paper bag. "Mom," she greeted me, her eyes quickly assessing my condition with the trained observation of a nurse. "Rough day?" "Manageable," I assured her. "Better now." Her gaze flickered to Thomas, a mix of wariness and curiosity in her expression. "So, you came to treatment?" "I did," he confirmed, meeting her eyes directly. "I should have been there. From the beginning." Jennifer set down her things on the coffee table. "Yes, you should have." There was no accusation in her tone, just a statement of fact. "But you're here now." Thomas nodded, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Jennifer busied herself warming her miracle broth on the stove, while Thomas made toast, the only food I could usually tolerate in the hours after treatment. They moved around each other in the kitchen with cautious politeness, like diplomats, from countries with a complicated history. "I heard about the teaching position," Jennifer said finally, breaking the careful silence. "That's quite a change." "It is," Thomas agreed. "A necessary one, I think." "Because of the separation?" He shook his head. "The separation is part of it, but not the cause. It's more about realigning my life with what actually matters." Jennifer studied him over the steaming pot. "And what does matter, Thomas, in your newly realigned life?" It was a challenging question, delivered without softening. I tensed, waiting for Thomas's defensive response, the retreat into corporate platitudes I'd seen so many times before. Instead, he met her gaze steadily. Family, service. Using what I know to help others navigate a system that's stacked against them. Being the kind of person our parents raised us to be. His voice lowered slightly. "The kind of person you've always been." Jennifer's expression remained neutral, but I saw the slight softening around her eyes. "That's a good answer," she conceded. "Let's see if your actions back it up." "Fair enough," Thomas said, accepting the challenge with a nod. They brought the broth and toast to the living room, setting everything on the coffee table within easy reach. Jennifer pulled up a chair close to the couch, her hand automatically finding mine, checking my pulse with the unconscious habit of a medical professional. "Emma wanted to come, but she has a test tomorrow," she explained. "She sent these, though." She passed me the paper bag, which contained cookies infused with ginger and lemon. Emma's latest anti-nausea experiment. Tell her thank you, I said, touched by my granddaughter's ongoing efforts to make treatment days more bearable. And congratulate her again on that art scholarship. I'm so proud of her. Jennifer beamed, maternal pride momentarily overshadowing all other concerns. She's already planning what she'll study in college. 2 years away, and she's got it all mapped out. What scholarship? Thomas asked, looking between us. The Oak Ridge Arts Foundation grant, Jennifer explained. It's competitive, only 4 awarded in the whole county. But Emma's portfolio impressed them. It covers her senior year art supplies and provides mentorship with a professional artist. That's wonderful, Thomas said sincerely. She's incredibly talented. She is, Jennifer agreed. She gets her creativity from Mom. I laughed weakly. I could barely draw a stick figure. Not that kind of creativity, Jennifer corrected. The kind that sees possibilities where others don't. The kind that builds something from nothing. She squeezed my hand. Like a good life on a teacher's salary. Like a family that stays connected despite everything. The words hung in the air, layered with meaning. Thomas looked down at his hands, absorbing the gentle rebuke embedded in her praise. I should let you rest, Jennifer said, gathering her things. Text me if you need anything tonight. I'm on call, but I can always send Emma over if necessary. I'll be fine, I assured her. Thomas is staying for a while. She glanced at her brother, a silent question in her eyes. I took the day off, he explained. I'll be here as long as Mom needs me. Jennifer nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good. But she bent to kiss my cheek. Love you, Mom. Try to eat a little more if you can. After she left, Thomas and I sat in companionable silence, the weight of the day settling over us. The chemo was taking its toll, my body growing heavier by the minute, my thoughts becoming fuzzy around the edges. You should sleep, Thomas said, noticing my drooping eyelids. I'll be right here if you need anything. I didn't have the energy to argue. As I drifted off, I felt him adjusting the blanket around my shoulders, his touch gentle and unfamiliar. The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me was the soft sound of him gathering the dishes, moving quietly through the house that had once been his home. When I woke, evening shadows had crept across the living room, and Thomas was sitting, in the armchair opposite the couch, reading a book by the soft glow of the table lamp. My mother's old quilt had been added to the blanket covering me, and a fresh glass of water waited on the coffee table. What time is it? I asked, my voice rough with sleep. Thomas looked up, setting the book aside. Just after 7. How are you feeling? Better, I said, surprised to find it was true. The nausea had receded, leaving only the bone-deep fatigue that was now my constant companion. What are you reading? He held up the book, one of Richard's old favorites, a well-worn collection of Robert Frost poems, found it on the shelf. Dad used to read from this, didn't he? On Sunday mornings before church. He did, I confirmed, touched that Thomas remembered. He loved Frost, especially The Road Not Taken. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, Thomas quoted softly. And sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, I continued, the familiar lines coming effortlessly despite my fatigue. Thomas smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. He would have liked that I'm teaching, he said. Dad always thought I should do something more, meaningful, with my life. He was proud of you, I corrected gently. But yes, I think he would have approved of this new direction. Thomas was quiet for a moment, turning the book over in his hands. I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about what we leave behind. Dad left kindness, integrity, the memory of a man who showed up every day for his family without complaint. He did, I agreed. What will I leave? Thomas asked, more to himself than to me. Stock portfolios? A corner office? A collection of golf club memberships? That's up to you, I said simply. It's never too late to choose a different path. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. I'd like to talk about the will again, Mom. I tensed slightly, wariness returning despite the peaceful moment we'd been sharing. Thomas, no, please, hear me out. He leaned forward, his eyes intent. I understand why you made the changes you did. Jennifer deserves the house, the security. She's earned it through consistent presence and support. The grandchildren's education trusts are perfect, fair, and forward-looking. Then what is there to discuss? I asked cautiously. I'd like to suggest an addition, he said. Not for me. I don't want or expect anything material, but I'd like to establish a fund in your name. The Barbara Wilson Teaching Excellence Award, maybe. A yearly grant for an exceptional teacher at Oak Ridge Elementary. I stared at him, caught completely off guard. You want to create a teaching award in my name? He nodded. It would honor your legacy, support the profession you loved, and benefit the community where we grew up. I've already spoken to the principal at Oak Ridge Elementary. She thinks it's a wonderful idea. You've already spoken to Principal Martinez? I was having trouble processing this unexpected development. Last week, I wanted to make sure it was feasible before suggesting it to you. He reached for a folder I hadn't noticed on the side table, pulling out several typed pages. It would be funded by me, administered by the school board, and awarded annually to a teacher who exemplifies the qualities you brought to the classroom: creativity, compassion, and commitment to seeing the potential in every child. I took the papers, scanning them in disbelief. There it was, spelled out in black and white, a detailed proposal for an award bearing my name, complete with criteria for selection, funding mechanisms, and a list of potential committee members to choose each year's recipient. You did all. This, I began, not quite sure how to finish the sentence. Because you deserve to be remembered, Thomas completed for me. Because the work you did matters. Because teachers like you change lives, and that should be celebrated. Tears welled in my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. Thomas immediately moved to sit beside me on the couch, his arm going around my shoulders with a tenderness I hadn't felt from him in years. I don't know what to say, I admitted, wiping at my cheeks with the edge of the blanket. Say yes, he urged gently. Let me do this for you. Let me create something that honors who you are and what you've meant. To this community, to me. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not the corporate executive who had dismissed my financial needs, but glimpses of the thoughtful boy he'd once been and the man he was trying to become. The man who quoted Robert Frost and remembered his father's Sunday morning rituals. The man who had spent his day off watching chemo drip into his mother's veins, who had pulled over without hesitation when nausea struck, who had sat guard over my sleep with a book of poetry in his hands. Yes, I said finally. I'd like that, very much. His smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds, tentative at first, then radiant. Thank you. I'll start the paperwork right away. Thomas, I said, placing my hand over his. This doesn't change everything. There's still hurt between us, still trust to be rebuilt. I know, he assured me. I'm not expecting instant forgiveness. Just the chance to show, through actions rather than words, that I understand what matters now. I nodded, accepting this. One day at a time. One day at a time, he echoed. Starting with tonight. I thought maybe I could stay over. Sleep. In my old room, in case you need anything during the night. The offer was so unexpected, so unlike the Thomas who had always valued his private space and rigid schedule, that for a moment I couldn't respond. You have work tomorrow, I said finally. I took tomorrow off too, he explained. I thought maybe, If you felt up to it, we could visit that new exhibit at the Oak Ridge Museum. The one about local history? It's wheelchair accessible, he added, quickly. And we can leave the moment you feel tired. The thoughtfulness of the suggestion, an activity calibrated to my interests and limited energy, touched me deeply. I'd like that, I said, but only if you're sure you can spare the time. I can, he said firmly. I will. That night, as I prepared for bed, I heard the familiar creaks and sighs of the house settling, sounds that had once accompanied the nighttime routines of a family of 4, then just Richard and me, and finally just me alone. But now there was the soft tread of Thomas's footsteps in the upstairs hallway, the gentle click of the guest room door, the reassuring knowledge that I wasn't alone in facing whatever the night might bring. I sat at my vanity, removing my headscarf and carefully applying the lotion the nurses had recommended for my dry skin. In the mirror, I studied my reflection. The hollows beneath my cheekbones, the papery thinness of my skin, the completely bald head that still startled me sometimes when I caught sight of it. But tonight, I saw something else as well. A quiet strength in the set of my jaw, a hard-won wisdom in my eyes. Cancer had taken much from me, but it had given something in return. The clarity to see what truly mattered, the courage to stand up for it, and now perhaps the grace to accept a genuine attempt at reconciliation. I had signed my revised will, securing Jennifer's future and acknowledging her unwavering support. But I had also left the door open, just a crack, for Thomas to prove through actions rather than words that he understood what truly mattered. The teaching award proposal was a promising start, thoughtful, meaningful, aligned with my values, rather than his usual financial metrics of success. Would it be enough to heal the wound his rejection had inflicted? Only time would tell. But for tonight, knowing he was under my roof, ready to help if needed, was enough to allow me to slip into sleep with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Morning brought weak autumn sunshine and the sounds of movement in the kitchen below. I dressed slowly, still tired from the previous day's treatment, but determined to enjoy the museum outing Thomas had planned. When I made my way downstairs, I found him at the stove, spatula in hand, a stack of pancakes already warming in the oven. "Good morning," he greeted me, looking oddly at home in my kitchen. "I hope you're hungry. I might have gone overboard." "They smell wonderful," I said truthfully. "I haven't had homemade pancakes since." I trailed off, trying to remember. "Since Dad made them that Christmas when Aiden was 4, Thomas finished for me. I remember because he shaped them, like stars, and Aiden thought it was magic." "You remember that?" I asked, surprised by the specificity of the memory. "I remember more than you might think," he said quietly. "Small moments, traditions. The way you always had hot chocolate waiting when we came in from sledding. How Dad would read the Sunday Tab comics in different voices." He flipped the last pancake onto the warming plate. "I haven't always honored those memories in how I've lived, but they've been there." We ate at the kitchen table, the conversation flowing more easily than I would have thought possible a few weeks ago. Thomas described his new apartment downtown, furnished, entirely from IKEA, which would give Pamela hives, and his first attempts at cooking for himself. "Did you know pasta boils over if you don't watch it?" Because I didn't. I found myself laughing despite everything, enjoying his self-deprecating humor and genuine enthusiasm for his new, simpler life. As he cleared our plates, insisting I remain seated, I was struck by how much healthier he looked. Already, less polished and perfect, but with better color in his face and a light in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. "Before we head to the museum," he said, returning from the kitchen, "there's something else I wanted to discuss." He sat across from me, his expression turning serious. "I'd like to host Thanksgiving this year." "At your apartment?" I asked. trying to picture his bachelor pad accommodating our family. No, here, in your home, our family home. He leaned forward earnestly. You shouldn't have to cook and clean while going through treatment. Let me handle everything. Jennifer and Emma can help, of course, and I'll invite Aiden and Sophie. Even Pamela, if that wouldn't be too awkward. I studied him, trying to imagine Thomas organizing a family holiday, buying groceries, cooking a turkey, setting a festive table. Do you even know how to cook a Thanksgiving dinner? He grinned. YouTube exists for a reason, Mom, and I've already started researching recipes. He pulled out his phone, showing me a meticulously organized list: turkey cooking times, stuffing ingredients, vegetable side dishes, even a note about Emma's gluten sensitivity. You're serious about this, I said, realizing it wasn't just an idle offer. Completely, he confirmed. Let me do this for you, for our family. Let me start rebuilding what I've damaged. Looking at his hopeful expression, I found myself nodding. All right, but I reserve the right to supervise the gravy. No one has ever mastered my technique. His smile was worth any uncertainty I felt about the arrangement. Deal. I wouldn't dare attempt your gravy unsupervised. The museum turned out to be the perfect outing for my limited energy. Thomas had called ahead to reserve a wheelchair, which he insisted I use despite my initial protests. Conservation of energy, he said firmly. Save your strength for enjoying the exhibits. He wheeled me through the displays of Oak Ridge history, from its founding as a mill town to its present status as a growing suburb. We lingered in the education section, where a collection of class photos from various decades included one from 1989, my third grade class, with Marianne Potter in the front row, her smile revealing missing front teeth. That's her, isn't it? Thomas asked. The girl whose father received your kidney. Yes, I confirmed, touched that he'd made the connection. Marianne. She's a pediatric nurse now. Because of you, he said softly. Because you saved her father, gave her those extra years with him. That's the kind of legacy that matters, Mom. Not money, not possessions. The lives you've touched, the difference you've made. I looked up at my son, this man who was trying so hard to find his way back to what mattered, and felt a surge of something I hadn't expected to feel toward him again. Hope. The weeks that followed settled into a new routine. Thomas came to every treatment, rearranging his work schedule without complaint. He stayed overnight afterward, helping manage the side effects that seemed to intensify with each cycle. Jennifer and Emma visited regularly, their initial wariness around Thomas gradually softening as they witnessed his consistent presence. The teaching award proposal moved forward, with Principal Martinez enthusiastically championing it to the school board. Thomas threw himself into the project with the same energy he'd once reserved for corporate acquisitions, attending meetings, gathering support, even creating a website to highlight past and present Oak Ridge elementary teachers. Meanwhile, Thanksgiving. Preparations proceeded with military precision. Thomas created spreadsheets for menu planning, shopping lists, and cooking timelines. He consulted YouTube tutorials on everything from turkey brining to table setting. Emma was enlisted to create place cards and centerpieces. Jennifer contributed her medical expertise on foods that would be gentle on my chemo-ravaged digestive system. Even Aiden and Sophie became involved, the former helping with heavy lifting, the latter reluctantly agreeing to bake pies under my supervision. Pamela declined the invitation politely but without rancor, suggesting instead that the children split the day between households. Their separation, Thomas explained, had evolved into an amicable, if permanent, arrangement, a mutual recognition that they had grown in different directions. We married young, he told me as we sorted through ornamental gourds for the table, decoration. Before either of us really knew who we were or what we wanted from life. And now? I asked, Now I know I want meaning over money, connection over status, he said simply. Pamela still values those things, and that's okay. We're different people now. As Thanksgiving approached, my oncologist delivered cautiously optimistic news. The tumors were shrinking, responding better than expected to the treatment. There would be more chemo, more difficult days ahead. But for the first time, remission seemed like a real possibility rather than a distant hope. It's working, I told Thomas as we drove home from the appointment, his face as alight with joy as my own. It's actually working. He reached across the console to squeeze my hand. Of course it is. You're the strongest person I know, Mom. Cancer doesn't stand a chance. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat at my kitchen table watching. Thomas and Jennifer worked side by side, preparing what could be done in advance. Emma was at the counter, carefully arranging her handcrafted place cards, little turkeys made from pine cones with each person's name written in her artistic calligraphy. Grandma, look, she called, holding up the one she'd made for me. I added extra glitter to yours because you're the guest of honor. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I told her, admiring the sparkly creation. You've made everything so special. That's the plan, Thomas said, looking up from the potatoes he was peeling. Everything special for our special mom. Jennifer caught my eye over his head, her expression soft with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps understanding. Acceptance of the change in her brother, tentative trust in its genuineness. In that moment, watching, my children working together, my granddaughter creating beauty from simple materials, I felt a profound sense of thanksgiving that had nothing to do with the holiday and everything to do with the human capacity for growth and change. Thomas had faltered, had shown the worst of himself when first confronted with my illness. But he had also found his way back to the core values I'd tried to instill, had chosen a different path when given the opportunity to reflect on what truly mattered. Was it perfect? No. There was still healing to be done, trust to be rebuilt, patterns to be reformed. But it was real and true, and moving in the right direction. And for tonight, for this moment of warmth in my kitchen with the people I loved, most in the world, that was more than enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.